Welcome to the Success Agents Podcast, where we deliver weekly guests that bring insight into the elements of your business to become more profitable with knowledge, skills, and tools that help you with automation so that you have less procrastination. With your hosts, Chris Parsons and JP Fluellen. What's up, guys? It's JP Fluellen riding solo today. Chris could not be with us. He actually has to have a closing today. So, when you're in the world of real estate, you've got to do deals because that's part of what we do. And so we are, and then last week we talked about 3 things that you need to be doing in your business because it's holding you back from being successful. So actually, we are going to ride with just me as the host today. And we've got special guest, the shiny and sparkling Dr. Sherry Fluellen. Yes, that is a Fluellen on the other end of that name. And she is my wife. And she is also a psychologist. And she has a PhD in education and counseling psychology. And she is a licensed clinical psychologist, and she engages in therapy locally here through telehealth and does entrepreneurial counseling. And this is among her favorite things to do. And she has been on Tony Salgado's Super Agents Live and talking about psychology and the selling and entrepreneurship. She's also been on Pat Hyben's Real Estate Rockstars, talking about psychology of real estate and keeping things healthy in marriages. And she has her own podcast now called The True Profit, which is focused on Christian entrepreneurs and content around how to profit both in life and in business. She also owns her own practice for 10 years, and she's employed over 70 people through that time, and also a handful of independent contractors. So she is got a long resume of dealing with people that have high drive and the willingness to succeed. And so we are going to dive deep in the topic of being on the same page in the same house. So if you've got a partner that's whether they're on the same page or not, and how that will drive success. So Dr. Sherry Fluellen, tell us about your story.
Well, thank you very much, JP Fluellen. I come from a background, a household where my dad, about halfway kind of into my childhood, bought in on a business. And so I saw him in his office in the evenings crunching numbers, and I knew he was doing some business stuff, but I never really saw it because that was not his kind of forefront way of making money for our family. But as we got older, and my sister kind of ventured off on her own, and she started to get into real estate investing, and then you and I, JP and I, started kind of thinking about real estate investing. The world of just kind of directing your own future, being the maker of your own money and figuring out how to do that just seemed like the natural progression. So I did join the Air Force as a psychologist for about 5 years. And then when I got out, I had already planned on kind of the entrepreneurial path from that point on, and owning a private practice and growing that. So that is where my primary entrepreneurial experience, both as an employer and trying to make the finances of a business work and learning what it's like to be a leader and leading and all the intricacies that go with that. It's my playground for the last 10 years.
Nice. So, and you've ran some masterminds over the years as well, right?
Yes, I've done some classes on leadership. The most fun one that I did was before Brené Brown's most recent book on leadership came out. I used Daring Greatly and turned that into curriculum to teach leaders about how to be vulnerable in the workplace, which was a lot of fun. And then I've helped co-facilitate masterminds on leadership and just people that are in kind of management or owner positions in businesses, and just providing a safe place for them to both grumble at times about the struggles of being the top dog, but also providing some camaraderie and answers about some of the struggles that they're having.
So when we're talking about leadership and business and the home life, like what is the probably the biggest challenge? Well, let's take it two directions. Let's go. Uh, the one person in the family has a regular job, and the other person's an entrepreneur. And then let's go the other direction and talk about um, one's an employee. They're really about stability and comfortability, and the other one is about drive and the unknown and wanting to see that taking that um, work and business to the next level. So let's talk about those two dynamics. Well, I guess really is there's a third one. There's the one is an entrepreneur and the other one's an entrepreneur, and they kind of are in sync with exactly what they get the drive of being an entrepreneur. They understand what it means to drag yourself through the mud to get to that next level and see those um, the shiny lights on the horizon, and if you will, in order to take um, their life from a sense of comfortability to a life of freedom.
So yeah, so let's first tackle the situation where you've got one person who has a job or maybe is stay at home, and then you've got one person who's an entrepreneur. And so implied there is that the challenge is if both, spouses don't understand the entrepreneurial mindset. That definitely can be a challenge because the entrepreneur should be in general, especially if this is the beginning of the business and a startup, they're going to be focused on the future, how to grow, how to expand, while their spouse is still, trying to hold the fort down and trying to figure out how you're going to pay the bills. You brought up a couple really interesting words, JP: stability and comfortability. And in the work that I do, one of the things that is, I think, really foundational is helping people understand their core values. And those two words could absolutely be a window into somebody's core value. The core value of just having stability. Core values are often developed out of past experiences. There's probably a portion of it that comes from our inborn personality. But for example, if if you came from a family that never knew where your next paycheck was coming from, you were really poor, some of those sorts of things, you might find yourself being more dependent on having a stable life. Like not having that stability is extremely anxiety provoking. So understanding that that's a core value of yours and having a conversation with your spouse about it and figuring out what their core values are, and then trying to figure out how do we meet in the middle, how do we mesh, that's one of the important foundations. And really that's regardless of whether you're both entrepreneurs or whether one is an entrepreneur, or kind of whatever the setup. Those core values are pretty important.
Okay, so defining core values can be a challenge because um, somebody's core value might be, freedom, and the other one might be um, family. So, trying to mesh those core values between the two, and, sometimes those can lead down some, having some very difficult conversations in order to be in unity because, with being, having two driven entrepreneurs in our family can sometimes, like, you can't see exactly what it is that you're seeing. Like I might see a core value in this light, and then you might see a core value in another light, and then I'm just like, I'm not understanding what you're meaning here, because to me the word freedom could mean finances and could mean, a healthy savings account, where in, the other person, freedom could mean just being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And or freedom might be freedom of schedule, like I can go in for 2 hours in the morning and take the rest of the week out off, you know. And so I guess the question really comes down to is, you know, how do we, you know, come to that common ground in terms of how we define these core values.
Well, your core values are have to be your own definition. And so if you identify freedom as one of your core values, you know, I think you bring up a good point that your vocabulary and my vocabulary are not necessarily going to have the exact same definitions. So it's not like you can just throw around a word and expect that to magically make everything okay. It's really the concept behind the word. And so you and I have had many of these conversations, and and you know, those that are listening, you have to have. It's not just drilling it down and getting that word of freedom. It's, well, what does that really mean? And then practically speaking, what does that look like on a daily basis? How does that inform the decisions that you make? And the more that you have clarity on your core values, what it actually means, and then how you put that into practice, your spouse needs to understand that. Now, two things are going to happen. Well, probably more than two things, but there's two major categories. One is that they're going to completely disagree with you, and there's going to be a lot of headbutting. And so there's no guarantee that, you know, bringing clarity to each other about your values is going to make, you know, smooth the waters over and everybody's going to agree. You may just be at a point where you need to agree to disagree. But, you know, what I think the goal is just, so think about this in your business. If you have a team, or if you've worked for a company, or kind of whatever your background is, you know, the place that you work at or your work has values and has a mission and all of that sort of stuff. And it doesn't mean that every employee that you have also subscribes to that exact same core value or mission. But what you're trying to do as a business owner is you're trying to take the core value and you're trying to help everybody understand how their core value can funnel or fit into the overarching core value of the mission. So it's not that people are at odds with each other, but there's some collaboration. And if you know, if the business core values succeed, well, then that means that you're succeeding as well in what you find important. And so in a marriage, or in a relationship, that same thing is present. You and I may have different core values, and most likely, I mean, I honestly have not met yet with a couple who've had the exact same core values. They may have one or two the same, which is helpful, but they're not going to have all the same. And if they do, there's going to be intricacies and nuances to them being different anyway. But it's about how do we fit these things together and support each other, even when your core value might be, you know, I don't really care about. So one of the things that when we were early out in our marriage, we've been married almost 20 years. So woo woo. One of the
Holla.
one of the things I remember us talking about way back when, we used to have a lot of arguments about money. You know, I mean, we didn't have much. And so when when JP would spend, when you would spend $5 going out to eat one day, you know, I would get frustrated because I'm like, we don't have $5 to just blow and do whatever we want. And so we had a lot of arguments and had a lot of, but one of the things that came out is at the time you had the perspective and the core value of, if we have money, we should be enjoying it today. Like, why wouldn't we enjoy it today? Now, my perspective, kind of, which is kind of how I grew up, is, well, money is meant for, you know, kind of more stability and future purposes. And so, you know, we both came into the marriage with very opposite end of the spectrum core values or ideas about how, you know, what money meant and what it was for. Now, over the years, we've closed that gap, and I think, you know, we work well together. But that's an example of, you know, kind of how you can start on opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm sure you don't remember any of those arguments, JP.
Oh no, I remember those. I have nightmares about those. Waking up in the middle of the night wondering if I still have that $5 in my wallet. It's like, oh geez. Oh, how did that $5 turn into $1? Who took my $5? No.
Well, at this point, it'd probably be the kids.
Well, this is true. It's true, because there was $5 in there, and and now they all of a sudden magically have some new toy that they somehow got to the store to buy without us there. So I don't know how that works out. But apparently they have their own marketplace at school. So there's this own they have their own e-commerce going on at in the student marketplace. But yeah, no, I mean you're I mean it's essential, you know, whether it's in personal or in business, that you have these deep conversations and find out what the meaning of it is. Because you're right, I mean, I grew up in an environment where, you know, we enjoyed what we had and didn't think about, you know, spending. You know, like thinking of the future was like putting, you know, $20 a year into a life insurance policy that had cash value over 30 years. You know, that was our idea of spend, you know, having savings. Like, you know, or it was just, oh no, our savings is just having a continuous credit balance on a credit card, and that's our savings account. You know, like that's just kind of how we grew up, and the value of money was just different, you know. So, um, but as I, you know, thought about being diligent in terms of, you know, what does this big picture of entrepreneurship look like, and understanding that, you know, if you've got different buckets for different things, then things start to form their own identity. And it takes on a, you know, they use the word gamification a lot in you know, how you change your mental processes of things. And so when, you know, as I was continuing on with my business, you know, as I gamify the different buckets, then it's more of a, you know, instead of giving a piece of myself away, it's more of something that makes sense in the way that my brain works, in terms of, you know, what does spending look like, what does saving look like, what does future developing look like, you know, what are all these different avenues of my business going to look like, you know, 2-3 years down the road. And so having an understanding of that, but then you have the challenge of then turning the tide, and having, you know, your family or your spouse or your partner understand um, what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you're in a stability situation where you know exactly what your incomes look like and you know exactly what your paychecks look like, it becomes very easy to be like, oh, well, I can just spend half and live on half or whatever. And your spouse might be like, that's irresponsible. But if you look at it from, well, we're just one paycheck away from the next flow of money coming in, then, you know, it just has this different definition. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, you know, they say, like, if you're, you know, self-employed, you start off every day unemployed and you have to figure out how to employ yourself every single day. And so
Yeah,
when you think about it in terms of like, the flow may not be there in 2 weeks,
right,
you know, and so then you have to, that's one idea and definition of money, and on the other hand there's a different idea definition. And so how, you know, the best thing is to try to figure out what it is that when those two worlds collide, you know,
right.
how do you make it so that everybody feels comfortable with the direction that you're headed. So
Right. I totally agree. And we're talking a lot about money and we're talking a lot about stability. And really those things are just, one potential core value. And we can continue on with that core value, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that, those may not be the rubs between you and your spouse. There are going to be other things. But the most critical piece is that you guys are having conversations about how to navigate the differences. But to go back to the stability and the money thing, while we, like I said, JP and I have learned to kind of meet more in the middle now, I still have the need for stability. And so some of the things that we've done that have helped with that is we have rental properties. And so when I look at the future and I look at retirement and, kids' college and all of that sort of stuff, I feel a sense of stability there because it's not dependent on what we're spending every month. We've got this vehicle, we've got this machine set up that's going to take us where we need to go. And so it's, there's stability there, predictability and stability. And another thing that I think is fantastic is, I think you may have talked about this before, JP, but Mike Michalowicz, the author, and he's written a book called Profit First. And I love what that can do for some of these core value differences, because his perspective is, you set up when all the income comes in, you've got these buckets based on a percentage. So if I'm concerned, like, JP's all about fun and wanting to do things fun. And so,
I don't like things fun.
no, not at all. You are
No,
just
I'm
stick in the
so
mud.
boring. So boring.
Every day is like Groundhog's Day with you.
That's right. Right. I'm always standing in the conveyor belt line, just moving pieces back and forth, and then I go to bed.
Right. So for JP to get his kind of needs met, he knows that there's a percentage of the income that can go to fun now. It comes from the profit account, and it can be spent, and it should be spent on things that are enjoyable, that are rewarding. And yet I get the satisfaction of knowing that there's a percentage of our income that is going to the future and to stability, and and the things that we've kind of already designated. So whether you use Profit First or some other budgeting strategy, I think that's a great way to meet in the middle. And in some ways.
Yeah, the other thing too is, time is another big one when you're trying to get on the same page, where, why do you always have to work nights and weekends? And why do you always have to have a 2 hours or 3 hours that you have to go to work on a Saturday or a Sunday?
I
And
never said that.
no, well, not those exact words, but
Okay.
something similar.
Yeah.
But I think too, it's these are conversations that people don't understand, especially, because our audience is primarily real estate agents. And I think, they might have a girlfriend or a spouse or a partner that's, listening to this, and they're just like, I just don't understand why we don't have, these huge blocks of time or whatever. And, like in my world, I've kind of like, it's not that you have to I don't try to separate business with personal or whatever. I think it's all just the real estate life, and I talk about that, in the real estate world, it is not a job, it's a lifestyle. So when you think about, like, think about it like this. If you're hanging out with a friend of yours that's a doctor, okay, and let's say, you're having a conversation. Next thing you know, he's talking about, doing some procedure and stuff like that. And it just gets really awkward all of a sudden. Like, when you're in those kinds of industries, you really need to separate personal with business. In real estate, like, you can have a conversation about real estate just about every single time with somebody that you're with, or where you're going, or what you're doing, or whatever. Somehow, where you live, what you do, and do you rent or own, somehow comes up in every single conversation. Or if you don't do that, then you haven't figured out that, that real estate's a lifestyle. So you're always talking about, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I have rental property. Oh, how's that going? Da 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 da. These are natural conversations to have. Now, when you're an hourly employee, you don't just come up and say, oh, how was it going working at, how many cars you work on a day? Oh yeah, I did this brake job or whatever. Or, you're a plumber or whatever. And the conversations get really boring and, or super technical, and nobody cares. So the thing, like, it is, you know, your spouse may not want to hear about your work all day long. May not want to hear about your real estate or whatever. And they're not understanding that real estate's a lifestyle. It's not a job. So, so there might be some, time and conversational expectations that you haven't had, because, real estate's one of those things where I don't have a HIPAA compliant thing I have to sign. And
Right.
I may want to talk about this deal that's really stressful to me or whatever, and I want to get that out. and your spouse may like, or if they're like a secretary or something, be like, how how many papers I pushed today? Do you know how many papers I did? You know how many staples I did today? No, you don't. Do you want me to just go off on you about that right now? So I think, you know, and then like if your spouse is at
So
home,
can I put a pause
sure.
on okay. So let me interject because you're saying a lot. Good listening skills, guys, and women is you say moderate amounts, chunks of information that the other person can digest and respond back to. So,
You're
okay.
dead to me. No, I'm just kidding.
um, so what and I've been frustrated with a lot of different things over the years with JP's real estate. And I'm just gonna be honest. I think there's definitely a learning curve and adjustment that happens when a spouse moves from another job into real estate because you're right, as JP has really dug into this and figured out, the mastery of it does become a lifestyle. And if I were to be resistant to that and fight it tooth and nail, things would not go well. I would constantly be frustrated and he would constantly be frustrated. It took me years to finally stop getting annoyed with him and getting sassy with him when he's like, well, I need to show a house this weekend or I have an open house or something. Like I imagine at the beginning of it all, I was probably rolling my eyes and like, come on, like, enough already. But, and sometimes now I have to keep those responses internal. I try not to let them, come out, and it's not that I don't want him to be successful at all. It's just, let's go back to values. I have a value of quality time with my family. And I like, contrary to popular belief, I like being around my husband. I like
What?
spending time. I know. I like spending time with him.
Oh,
And
hey, thanks.
and I like predictability, and that's probably one of the biggest things. And so and so we have a very detailed schedule, and when something in that schedule changes spontaneously, I've had to learn how to dial back my kind of internal response to that, and just be more accepting and understanding. So it's a work in progress, but I think I have made significant strides. But there
I
is a
think
learn
so.
Yeah, thank you. And there's a learning curve to adjusting to what real estate life really is. I see how important this is to JP. I see how it shapes his attitude in a good way. It provides positive feedback to his efforts. It shapes his character in a positive way as well. All of these things I see. And so I very intentionally will ask him almost every day, how was your day? Tell me what happened. What good things happened? What are some successes? What are you frustrated about? I don't always have to ask him those specific things because he usually just, unloads it all anyway, which is fine. But as the spouse of a real estate agent and team leader and associate broker, those are things that I consciously do to try to support him because I know this is incredibly important to him.
Well, I think on that note, we'll just kind of end it there. Sherry, how can Dr. Sherry Fluellen, how can people get a hold of you if they want to get some more insights on the um, life of a spouse of a real estate agent or of any other nature and, outside of actual therapy? Where can they get a hold of you?
Best is email through my practice, which is Sherry, SHERI at mindspatherapy.com. I do therapy locally and through telehealth, which is governed by licensure in states. But I do also do consulting, which is not governed by licensure by state. So I am able to do consulting with people that live anywhere, honestly. And it's fun, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of seeing entrepreneurs who are really trying to do their best and who are making great strides be able to have these other pieces of their life kind of fall together a little bit better so that you can be supported, because if your home life is a wreck, your business is going to be a wreck. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you have to be married to your spouse and be married to your business. And I think that's how you make them work, you know. Hard work makes the dream work, you know.
Hard work, but smart work.
Yes, yes. So if you guys want to get a hold of me, you can reach me at james.fluellen@gmail.com. You can go to my Clixo page. It's CLYXO /J Fluellen, has all my social media out there. And if for some reason you can't remember any of that, just remember JP Fluellen. It's like Ellen has the flu. Type that into Gmail or Google. You'll find me anywhere. You can go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. There's only like 80 families of Fluellans in the whole United States. So if you can't find me, then you're not looking very hard. So, on that, guys, thanks again. We really appreciate you getting involved with this podcast. And please leave us a review. So, go on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, and any places where audio is found and leave us a 5-star review. We do this stuff for free. If you find value in what we do, we really appreciate you guys. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks a lot and peace out.